All right, well, welcome everyone. Since this is a Berkeley event, it means that it actually starts 10 minutes after the scheduled time. So for all of you who are here in a timely way and in advance of our beginning, I'm going to play some video that will warm you up, that will expose you to a tiny bit, anyway, of the wonderful work of our panelists today. We'll start with the trailer from the recent documentary film about Chris Strachwitz and his work. And here it is.
What's mouse music? Well, mouse music is could be described as
mouse music is music that's cheap and not real.
Mickey Mouse jumps around a little artificial creature.
Music that is popular, cheesy, put together music with no soul.
Inauthentic. We're gonna get this movie. Oh shit. That stuff isn't produced. I just catch it as it is.
It's the music of your neighbors, you just don't know it. And Chris has been collecting it, preserving it, selling it, exposing one culture to another. I mean, he's a treasure.
I just fell in love with making records. They're kind of neat snapshots. There'll never be another one like it. Most record companies record everything that they think is commercial. I didn't want to record stuff I don't like.
With classic record band, not corporate, not about to take orders or fit into any kind of system. See, those are the kind of people that started the record business in this country.
Look what an unbelievable influence that something like country blues has had on popular culture. I mean, massive, massive, massive. And if it wasn't for people like Chris going out and recording this stuff, we wouldn't know about it, and in some cases it might have just disappeared out of cultural history.
I just dove into this like a guy diving into a swimming pool, having a great adventure underwater or whatever, or going to paradise without having to suffer death, you know.
It's because of him, really, that I guess I'm here now. I probably wouldn't have embraced the culture as much as I have. Of course, I mean, I would have found it, but I probably wouldn't have found it quite as interesting as I do now, you know, because I got to see it through the eyes of an outsider.
I don't know, I like it so much. It's just got some guts to it. It ain't wimpy, that's for sure. It ain't no mouse music.
All right. Next are Kim Nalley with a recording that she made herself quite recently, I think, yes?
Just right after about a year ago now.
Okay, here we go.
Down I'm walking, the rain falling down, brothers waiting and passing around. His footsteps were hurried 'cause he was gonna stand, but to one he was just a big pretty black man. But to one he was just a big pretty black man. Don't want no one stealing, know where he from. The police don't ever take care of them punks. Got my kick, tied my hand, and I'm gonna go after big hooded black man. Yeah, I'm gonna go after a big hooded black man. Mama cried, my baby still won't hear from my fact, it still ain't safe. You know it ain't safe in this land. You better watch out, yo, a big booty black man. You only can see a big booty black man.
Yeah. All right, and one more, and then we'll get started. Here is our distinguished guest, Mavis Staples, with a video montage. Oh, and I'm sorry, there's a terrible ad. That's yeah, Mickey Mouse is right. Yeah, that's the YouTube problem.
All the times down in jail, had no money for the their bill. Keep your eyes on the prize. Hold on. Hold on. Hold on. Hold on. Keep your eyes on the prize. Hold on. Hold on. Hold on. Keep your eyes on the prize. Hold on. All the sounders, the gun, the shout. It was out going and all wore down. Keep your eyes on the prize. Hold on. Hold on. Hold on. Keep your eyes on the prize. Hold on. Well, the only chance we can stand are the chains of hand in hand. Keep your eyes on the prize. Got my hand on the freedom plow. Wouldn't take nothing for my journey now. Keep your eyes on the prize. Hold on. Hold on. Hold on. Keep your eyes on the prize. Hold on. Hold on. Hold on. Hold on. Keep your eyes on the prize. Hold on, hold on, keep your eyes on the prize. Hold on, hold on, hold on, keep your eyes on the prize. Hold on.
And now the magic moment has arrived. It's 12:40 and we'll begin. And while our panelists assemble, in chairs up on stage, I will start by making a few introductory remarks. So if you all want to head on up. So welcome, everyone. This is, of course, our panel discussion on music and protest as part of our campus's 50th anniversary. Okay, 50th anniversary commemoration of the free speech movement. And my name's Mark Peterson, and I am a professor in the history department, and I had the pleasure of serving on the campus committee that helped to choose the book, the On the Same Page book that was sent out to all of our incoming students. And since this is the 50th anniversary of the free speech movement, that book was a really wonderful biography of Mario Savio called Freedom's Orator. And so all of our incoming students were sent that book, and we've been discussing it and aspects of it ever since. And as my part of that committee, I felt compelled to make the point that we could not discuss free speech and civil rights on this campus without discussing music and the importance of music in that experience. And so that is what we're here to do today. So the way that our panel will work is this. I will make a few introductory remarks, although I think our panelists don't need a whole lot of introduction, and then take the moderator's privilege of asking a question to get the ball rolling. And then once we do that, we want to open up the microphones to our audience as soon as possible to make this a real discussion. So without any further delay, let me begin. First, it is my enormous pleasure, once in a lifetime really, to introduce Mavis Staples. Oh, you're very welcome. What a treat, what a treat. I'm not done yet either. Here, Mavis is, of course, as I'm sure you all know, a music legend, first with the Staples Singers, founded by her father, Roebuck Pop Staples, along with her brother and sisters, singing gospel songs and playing a key role in providing musical support for Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and the Civil Rights Movement. She began making hit records as early as 1956 with Uncloudy Day, which I brought my vinyl copy of, in the hope maybe I could get an autograph later.
Okay.
All right. Brilliant recordings with Stax Records in the late 60s and early 70s, such as Respect Yourself and I'll Take You There and Heavy Makes You Happy and many, many others, and collaborating with countless other leading musical figures from Mahalia Jackson to Bob Dylan, from Prince to Jeff Tweedy and Wilco, and making more amazing records to this day, including 2007's We'll Never Turn Back, which that last recording was from, and most recently, this year's, and Ry Cooder, of course, yes, and this one, last year's One True Vine. I don't even have the CD in it here because it's currently in the car, in the CD player there, because we listen to it so much. Thank you very much for being here, Mavis.
Thank you.
All right, I'll continue. No, well, you can all do the question and answer from where you're seated. You don't even have to get up. Second, this is just such an astonishing panel. I can't get over it. But our second guest is Chris Strachwitz. You saw the video of his. As you've seen, he's subject of the recent documentary, This Ain't No Mouse Music, which I saw when it played down the street here at the Rialto, but it's now literally playing all over the country. It's everywhere from Albuquerque, New Mexico to Cleveland, Ohio, and points in between. Chris began recording music, making and selling records around 1960, going to Texas and Louisiana to record the likes of blues musicians Mance Lipscomb and Lightnin' Hopkins, Clifton Chenier, the King of Zydeco, and he has not stopped since, traversing the country to capture the work of vernacular artists in every imaginable genre and bringing them to a wider public. In addition to his Arhoolie records, he runs the Down Home Music record shop on San Pablo Avenue in El Cerrito, and currently spends much of his time with the Arhoolie Foundation, which is digitizing the commercial recordings of Mexican music from the earliest days right up to the end of the vinyl era. Is that right? Okay, very good. I got it. All right, thank you, Chris. Next, I didn't have any videos to show of Waldo, because as far as I know, he hasn't moved into the performance side of things. But nonetheless, Waldo Martin is my colleague, the Morrison Professor of History here at UC Berkeley, and an extremely popular teacher of courses on African American history, modern politics and culture, and he's currently offering a course on the free speech movement in the 1960s. And I say with authority that Waldo is an extremely popular teacher because my office is across the hall from his. And at office hours, the lines out the door, the amount of time Waldo spends dealing with the students that flock to his office is astonishing. Waldo is the author of many books and articles, including an essay on Mario Savio and the freedom struggle in Berkeley and Mississippi, along with this book, No Coward Soldiers, Black Cultural Politics in Post-War America, which has a great deal to say about music and politics in the 1970s in particular. And most recently, of Black Against Empire, the history and politics of the Black Panther Party. So Waldo, thank you for being here. And last and certainly not least is Kim Nalley, whose video you saw earlier, one of a number that she's been writing and producing lately having to do with current issues in American political life and civil rights. She's a jazz and blues singer of extraordinary talent. She's performed everywhere from jazz at Lincoln Center to the San Francisco Symphony, and I'm guessing overseas too, yes? I just don't have all a list of them here. She's done remarkable interpretations of the work of Billie Holiday and Nina Simone. She writes and performs her own material. She's the former club owner of the jazz club Jazz at Pearls in San Francisco, and that's not all, folks. She's a current UC Berkeley history PhD candidate writing a dissertation with the brilliant title of GI Jazz. And what's the rest of the title?
Right.
GI Jazz and?
African Americans as artists and occupiers in post-World War II Germany.
All right, way to go. So, as moderator of the panel, my aim is mostly to stay out of the way and let our fantastic group of panelists speak from their own experience about this topic, which involves the relationship between music and movement or protest politics, both in the era of the free speech movement and in subsequent years right up to the present. And so to begin, to bring a little bit of focus to this, I'm going to take my privilege of asking the first question. And to do that, I want to remind, as if you need reminding, that the free speech movement here on the Berkeley campus took place in the context of Mario Savio's and many others' recent participation in Mississippi Freedom Summer in 1964, as well as in their involvement in other civil rights groups such as CORE here in the Bay Area. And the energy and the conflicts of the civil rights movement would soon also infuse the growing anti-war movement in America as well. And music was, of course, an integral part of these interrelated movements. And rather than say that to you, I'm going to quote from Mario Savio himself. This is from Robbie Cohen's terrific biography of him, describing his experience in July of 1964 at a convention of the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party that summer was organizing to try to see if they could displace the traditional and extremely racist Mississippi Democratic Party. So at the end of the convention, Savio wrote, "Everyone joined hands to sing, 'We Shall Overcome.' And we shall. Someday white people will thank Negroes for saving America from the historical trash can. Freedom and democracy are things to sing about, but what white northerner has not at some point felt uncomfortable when singing about freedom? I have felt that discomfort. Down here, I do not." Right? So even at the beginnings of this, music and singing were part of what became both the civil rights movement and the free speech movement here on campus. Now, in addition, I want to mention the two extraordinary developments in the world of American music that took place in the decade leading up to 1964. On the one hand, the rise of rock and roll music, and at the same time, the so-called folk revival, as what were then the two most popular forms of music appealing to young people at the time. Both movements shared a willingness to cross racial lines that had traditionally separated musical performers and audiences. And yet there seems to have been a great deal of boundary policing in the music world at the time, coming from radio and television stations, live venues where music was performed, from the recording industry, and even from the fans of the various musical genres themselves. especially with folk music and rock and roll perceived to be at odds, quite famously in the hostile response of folkies to Bob Dylan's turn to electric guitar. Similarly, in Greg Kott's recent biography of Mavis Staples, which I have here, I'll take you there. I'm plugging all the products that there are to plug today. The biography pays a great deal of attention to the way the gospel music community reacted, often unfavorably, to the Staples singers' ventures into blues or popular genres. Nina Simone and Billie Holiday, both great jazz artists whose work Tim Nalley has interpreted, faced career challenges when their music turned from traditional popular jazz standards to protest songs. And as I mentioned, Waldo Martin has written eloquently about this subject in No Coward Soldiers and in essays like Be Real Black for Me, Representation, Authenticity, and the Cultural Politics of Black Power. And as you've seen from the trailer to the film, Chris Strachowitz's records, which he began producing in the Deep South in the early 1960s, have crossed an extraordinary range of musical genres, and he himself in that trailer talks about defying the dominant commercial trends in much of the record industry. So after that long-winded introduction, here's my question to ask the panelists and get the ball rolling. The question really is to ask them to comment on the tensions or the conflicts they faced and faced by musicians with respect to their own musical aspirations, what they want to sing or play or produce, and their interest in producing music with a political or social message, and yet also the demands of music as a business. In other words, how did the challenge of making a living as a musician or a music producer shape their efforts to produce music with a social or political message? And finally, have those challenges changed over the years? So that's a big, broad question. I ask all of our panelists to begin by responding to that, and then we'll open up the discussion to the audience as a whole. Whoever wants to start can start.
Well, I'll tell you, I didn't have any say-so in the matter. My father, I was so young when we started. Pop started us singing when I was like 8, 9 years old. And I didn't even realize we were singing for a living until later. I was just singing. I was just so happy to be singing. And, you know, he called us in the living room one evening, myself and my siblings, and he told us we're going to sing. And he began giving us voices to sing that he and his brothers and sisters would sing when they were in Mississippi. And there were 14 of them. So, you know, they had a choir. They had so many children, they ran out of names. So Pops and my uncle were the last two. And everybody in the South had this catalog, Sears and Roebuck. So they got the idea to name my uncle Sears, and they named Pops Roebuck. You know? But he started us singing. We started singing in churches. We were singing gospel music. One of my aunties, Aunt Katie, lived with us. She came through the living room one night and she said, "Shucks, y'all sound pretty good. I believe I want y'all to sing in my church Sunday." And oh, we were so happy we were going to sing someplace other than on the living room floor. So we went to Aunt Katie's church. We sang this song. This one song, the very first song Pops taught us. And the people liked it so much, they clapped us back. We didn't even know what that meant. People would tell us, "Baby, they want to hear y'all again." We'd sit down, you know. So we had to sing that song 3 times, because it was the only song that he had taught us all the way through. And Pop said, "Shucks, we're going home and learn some more songs. These people like us." And we did that. We sang on till I was about 11 years old. And Vivian Carter was in church that morning. She called Pop. She said, "Staples, you and those children need to be on record." And Pop said, "Well, Vivian, I don't know nothing about them records, so I don't want my children singing on records." And he waited till I was maybe 13. And he called her and told her, "Okay, we're ready to make a record now." And we did. We recorded Uncloudy Day. And Uncloudy Day, so she called Pops one morning. She said, Staples, this song is selling like an R&B. And she had never seen. It turned out that Uncloudy Day was the very first gospel record to sell 1 million. And that's when we began singing for a living. They started calling us from everywhere. Letters came in. Pops, we would drive, he would drive. He would go to school and tell my teachers, Mavis won't be here Monday morning. Give her some homework. I'd take my homework on the road, and Pop started paying us. You know, we started making this money. And we'd go to places, because on this song, I was singing bass, a lady's bass, of course. But still, people didn't believe that it was a lady. You know, the disc jockeys down in Atlanta and Memphis, well, this is little Mavis Staples singing this part on, and people would actually bet that I was not a little girl. They said, it's got to be a man or a big fat lady. So when we would sing this song, we would sing it down in harmony. Whoa, they tell me of a home, all in all. And my part would come at the end. I'd say, well, oh, Lord, they tell me now. And my brother, people would be sitting on edge waiting for that part. So Purvis would walk up to the mic like he was going to start. And you would hear all over, but I told you that wasn't no little girl. While they're going through that, I eased on up to the mic and I hit it. Well. And oh, Lord, please. People would get mad at me. One man told me, little old girl, I'd bet my whole paycheck on you. And Pops would tell him, well, you see, you shouldn't bet. And that was our, beginning of really making money. For the most, we would sing in churches around Chicago before we started, before Uncloudy Day. And we would see, sometimes, they'd raise an offering, Papa said, well, we made $7 tonight, But when we started on the road, he came home one day, he had attaché case so full of money. He told my mother, he said, oh, see, I believe me and the children can make a living with this thing. And Mama said, Roebuck, don't you start talking about quitting your job. Because he was working construction work at Crane Company. But that's what we did, and they waited until I finished high school, and we hit the road for good, and been going ever since. Sorry, my story was so long.
Chris, how about you? Was there a conflict for you as you were starting out and
this is a hard act to follow?
We'll make Mavis go last.
But I saw her at the Oakland Auditorium when that record came out. I was so taken by it. There used to be a radio program every Sunday morning on KRE in Berkeley, and they played that record. I just couldn't believe the sound. You had that Mississippi type guitar backing this extraordinary vocal group. And I remember I asked a fellow student at Cal to go with me, and I don't know, she must have thought, my God, what is this? It was an all-black event at the Oakland Auditorium in those days. I don't think there were any other white people there. And when she came on with that sound, I don't think Purvis was doing any fooling around. It was just you, and people were falling out. That's what they used to call it in church, when the Spirit hits them with that voice that's coming out of nowhere. Whew. That was absolutely amazing. And, so I can tell you that I was interested in all these different American musical traditions. I was learning constantly. There were more and more, not just gospel music, the blues, there was jazz, there was hillbilly music. And they all had this powerful something in them. I don't know what it was, but people just had to speak out, And amongst those items that I found, I did find some that you could call protest records. Actually, I recorded one. If you want to play one, it's that one I Have to Paint My Face on that disc called Protest. Or what is it called? Anyway, it was. I was on my first trip to meet up with Paul Oliver, the British blues scholar, and his wife in Memphis, and I recorded this fellow in Hollandale. He used to be a member of the Mississippi Sheiks back in the 30s and so on, and he sang this song called "I Have to Paint My Face," which I thought was just an absolutely amazing protest song that he did personally. Did you?
I think you've got that CD. I've got the other one.
Oh, really? No. It has these. Yeah, that's the one.
It's on
That's the one. It's the first cut.
Okay, we'll get the other machine up.
And anyway, you'll hear the words really clear. That's about the first time I came across a real protest song. And then also in Texas, when I recorded Mance Lipscomb, we had heard about this song that Lightning Hopkins had made a recording of called Tom Moore. It was about a plantation owner. But, you know, I just found out that people were singing straight out songs that are protesting their condition or their experience or their way of living, of life, exactly. And I'd like to also do the one by Brother Will Hairston. I don't know if you ever heard the Alabama Bus. That fellow in Detroit recorded. Anyway,
we got your first one coming up now, I think.
Okay, this is "I Have to Paint My Face" by Sam Chapman. He was.
The God made a soul. He made some at night. That's why it didn't take time to make us all white. I'm bound to change one day. I have to paint my face. So I won't be cared to that easy open way. Say now let me tell you one thing that a sundown nigga will do. He'll pull up your cotton and he'll kill baby chickens too. I'm bound to change my name. I have to paint my face. So I won't pretend to let easy open rain. Say when God made me.
Okay.
It kind of goes on like that. It's really powerful song. He never did record it for anybody else. I'm not sure why or what the story was, but you know, he obviously felt that I was somebody who was not putting out commercial records. You know, I don't know. Maybe he really wanted it out there as a commercial record. It's hard for me to tell. But then here in Berkeley, I was, of course, a part of. You know, you couldn't help it but be part of the protest against the war, against the Vietnam War. And I was just so lucky that I was drafted between the Korean War and the Vietnam War. And I didn't have to go to either one of them, but I knew what, you know, you got a feeling for what it was, because by that time the war was on TV. And you could really tell what a horror show this was. And this friend of mine, he called me up and he says, "Chris, you know, have you got your tape machine ready?" I was already in my house living here in Berkeley at the time, must have been in 63 or 4, I forgot. And he said, "You have your tape machine ready? I got to make this song by these guys because we want to issue this little record to sell at the protest march against the Vietnam War that's coming up really soon." And I said, okay, I finally agreed, because I was actually leaving for Europe the next day with Lightning Hopkins. I was going to meet up with him in Houston, Texas, because he was going to be on the American Folk Blues Festival
tour for Horace Lippman and Fritz Rau. This was the beginning, really, at the same time of blues, the real blues. You know, most people here still called it R&B at that time because it was called black music. You know, it was just called, just like you said, the gospel songs were beginning to sell like R&B. You know,
right.
That was just the start of it. And so I thought, okay, bring him over, and finally, you'll see that in that movie. I don't know. Ed Denson brought this motley crew of hippies in, and I hung one microphone from the ceiling or from my fixture, and here goes 1, 2, 3. What are we fighting for? Next stop is Vietnam.
You want a few minutes of that, Chris?
Yeah, why don't we play a little bit of it?
Okay, good.
This is the first recording of that song in my living room.
Here comes 1, 2, 3, 4, right?
If you can get the computers to work. No. What's that? No.
It'll be there in a sec.
No, that's a much later recording.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
That's not the one. No,
Okay.
no, it's in this
Okay.
thing. That's much later.
Okay.
Can't you do it's number.
1, 2, 3, 4. What are we fighting for? 5, 6, 7, 8. Come up early, gig.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
It's number 11.
Well, give me just a second, and we'll get that on, and then we'll move on to some of the other.
Yeah.
But you know, I can talk a little bit about my experience. I was cleaning houses, and my whole goal was to have enough gigs so that I could stop cleaning houses. That was the plan. And you know, when you're a jazz singer, they expect you to look cute and keep your mouth shut. And when you haven't made a name for yourself, you're kind of wallpaper or a flower arrangement. You know, you're not supposed to be too abrasive. And so, you know, you got to work up to the point where people are willing to pay money to see you, that you're allowed to have an opinion about anything. But even when you get to that point where you finally get enough following so that you can say what you want to say, there's this very concerted pressure inside of the jazz industry that, especially female jazz vocalists, if you sing anything other than a standard, you cease to be a jazz vocalist. And you know, maybe a couple of people will get, you know, a pass. You know, maybe they'll give, you know, Billie Holiday a pass, you know, because of her background, you know. But then somebody like Abby Lincoln, they're going to just shame her. You know, oh, you went from a supper club seductress, and oh, now you're all black and proud. You know, what is that all about? So, you know, recording a protest song as a jazz singer, recording anything that's not a standard as a jazz singer today is close to impossible, unless you self-produce or, you know, you put it out there on the internet for other people to get at it.
Wow.
And let me add that much of Kim's work is available on a YouTube near you, right? I mean, it's out there and it's great. Waldo, did you want to join in on this? Or?
I want to see what this thing is.
Okay, I've got Chris's song queued up.
I think the best way for me to keep it short is to acknowledge that growing up deeply churched and thinking about that experience over the course of my life, it is the most important thing that has shaped me. And the thing that really hit me in church, even though we had a great preacher, was the music. And I was totally convinced that there was something happening in the music that was working in ways that the voice didn't always capture. And so I've always had this idea that the music is operating in ways that we don't really understand and can't really appreciate. And the older I get, the more I believe this. in any teaching that I do, music has to be essential because I'm after authentic Black voices, and in a lot of music, it's where Black people can sort of be who they want to be, even though the industry often doesn't allow that. But the kind of singing that Mavis personifies is the kind of singing, not quite at that level, but you know, in that tradition that I grew up with. And it, in our church, the kind of word they would use would be anointed. It's an anointed voice. And her voice is truly anointed. And we had one woman in our church who had that kind of voice. And to this day, every time I go home, I talk to her. She's in her 90s, because to me, she really epitomized and captured something about protest. And let me work with protest. To me, the music is all about sustaining Black people, affirming Black people, enabling Black people to do and be. And protest is part of that, but protest is only a part of that. And to me, that's one of the glories of the movement. The movement sort of built on that aspect of the music. But my soapbox is this: so often we talk about music as the soundtrack to the movement. Music as the soundtrack. To me, the music is as pivotal as anything. It was a singing movement. You know, it was a singing movement. You have to think about that. And the way in which the singing shaped the music and the music shaped the singing. And so I really, really think that for me, it's an extraordinary honor to be here. My sister-in-law's favorite artist is Mavis Staples. When I told her that I was going, she screamed and shouted. She said, "Make sure you get an autograph." You know, and her name is Avis. And so it's like, it's really wild. That's another thing. So I have to get that autograph.
Okay.
But that's basically it. And I grew up in a household where there was a lot of music. My father, I didn't really understand this until later, that my father was basically a hillbilly. And he liked all this country music and all this other stuff that I really didn't like. You know, Johnny Cash, who is this guy? And so I heard all this stuff. Some of it I didn't really like, but the older I get, I really can understand how all these tributaries come together, and the boundaries that I wanted to construct when I was younger don't really mean anything. And that great music is great music, you know, wherever you hear it, it should speak to us all. And so for me, protest is part of a larger tributary of Black freedom struggle, and the way in which the music is part of a larger Black freedom struggle.
All right, well, let's hear now the correct version. I don't know if this is an anointed voice or not, but here it comes.
That's it.
Okay.
That's it.
Oh, no, we're not done.
Oh, this is the living room?
Well, come on, generals, let's move fast. Your big chances come at last. Now go out and get those rest. Cause the only good copy is the one that's dead. And you know that this can only be one when you're going on a king of dog. And it's 1, 2, 3. What are we fighting for? Don't ask me, I don't give a damn. Next up is Vietnam. And it's 5, 6, 7. Open up 30 gates. Well, there ain't no time to wonder why. We're all going to die. Well, come on, mother, straight out the land. Won't stack boys off to Vietnam. Come on, fellas, don't hesitate. Hey, sing your sons off before it's too late. You can be the first ones in your block. Have your boy come home in a box. And it's 1, 2, 3. What are we fighting for? Don't ask me, I don't give a damn. Next up is Vietnam. And it's 5, 6, 7. Open up the pearly gates. Well, there ain't no time to wonder why. We're all gonna die.
All right.
In your living room.
Well, I heard it, you know, I thought it was a funny song because the way it starts, you know, just like a jug band kind of thing, but it had these unbelievably heavy lyrics to it. And anyway, that's the song that became the anthem of the whole, what's that place that made that big, Woodstock.
I hear you, my brother.
Anyway, I got to confess something, though. I mean, I don't think I really got to confess because I learned from Ed Denson that you have to protect people that you record to make sure their stuff is published in their name, you see. And so when Joe McDonald, the leader who sang that song, better known as Country Joe McDonald, I asked them, you know, he asked me, what do I owe you for the tape, Chris? I said, you don't owe me nothing, but do you have a publisher for them? And he said, no, I don't think so. So he gave me the publishing rights to the song. And so we both made a bundle of money on it because in those days you split it 50-50. And I'll never forget, when the first check came in for $70,000 I put my half down on that building in El Cerrito.
Oh, right.
And he did whatever he, but I also realized though that, you know, that there is no money in the record business per se. The money was in the publishing. I learned that from several people that I dealt with. And so it was, in a way, I felt like, sure, I was hoping to make some money on it, maybe, but I also felt like I had to protect these singers. I mean, most of them knew nothing about publishing. And so that's what I did. And when that money came in, actually, I used a whole bunch of it to copyright some of the things that I had already recorded. Anyway, that's my commercial aspect of the...
Well, look, we have a wonderful audience here, so let's start opening it up to questions from the field. We have some microphones here. Alex has one.
Yeah.
So if you have a question,
yes, would it be okay to
and...
start with a few student questions?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Student
If you're a
Looks
student,
like there's
raise
one
your
right behind you.
Is a student behind me? Okay,
Yes.
good. This is mic number 1.
Hi, I'm Jasmine. My question was about how music can change the protest space. I was wondering, do you think that music can placate people or make it relatable, or does it radicalize people? And do you think protest music makes a more inviting space for potential allies, or does it alienate them? Because these musical styles that they're unfamiliar with. So I was kind of thinking specifically about rap and hip hop.
You got it, Waldo.
No, well, you can field with that.
You know, I don't know, Kim, you want to...
That's the modern stuff.
Yeah. That is,
Oh, yeah, Kim.
this is, you know, I'm definitely someone that looks more to the past, you know, than the music of my generation. I guess hip hop would be my generation. But if I look at it inside of a global context, I do see that that hip hop and some of the Black cultural politics of African Americans has been globalized through hip hop music. So you can see there's this one Griff Rolifson, who was inside the music department and the African American Studies department a couple years back. He wrote a wonderful dissertation that is just about ready to be published on African Americanization of hip hop music in Germany. And you see Turkish people, and they call themselves niggers, and they really relate to the plight of black people within the context of their oppression inside of Germany. So, and you look at the Arab awakening, and what are they singing? They're singing "We Shall Overcome," wherever you go. So I think there's a universality to music that really makes it special. Whatever type of genre it is, the freedom speaks to people.
Well, and I've noticed that now hip-hop and rap artists are sampling Mavis's music and Staple Singer's music. And
they do.
Yeah.
Do you get the checks?
I get money.
How much? A few pennies?
I get paid, yeah. Oh, no, you can do nice. Yeah.
Well, I'm curious what your reaction is to that.
Sorry?
How you feel about that.
I'm flattered that they want to use my voice in their songs. It lets me know that the young people are listening to the Staple Singers. And Salt and Pepper, when they used it, I just happened to be, we were at President Clinton's inauguration. I'm in the next dressing room from them, and someone told them that Mavis Staples is next door, and they started hiding from me. Oh, she's gonna beat us up. I said, oh no.
They didn't pay the royalties.
They didn't know. They thought, because I was a gospel singer, and they used it. Let's talk about sex, baby. And and the only part of my voice they used was ow, how. Right at the beginning of the song, and I got paid for that, So I don't mind. How anywhere, But it really flatters me that Michael Jackson, he took my Shamo.
Oh, that's
Right. And my mom called. She said, "Mavis, this little old Michael is stealing your words." I said, "Mama, no, I really didn't get anything from Michael, but I was flattered and I appreciated that he was listening to me. I'm bad, it. Shamo. And today, when I sing "I'll Take You There" and I say "Shamo," these young kids, she's using Michael Jackson's words. So it's all good, I appreciate it.
But there are some preachers. I recorded a preacher in Mississippi, and once I put the record out, somebody came along, they wanted to sample his work. And of course I asked him about it, and he absolutely refused to have his work be any part of any such thing. Yeah.
Oh, no, I don't mind.
As long as you got the money.
I get paid. And James Brown was the reason. James Brown did that because so many were sampling him. And at first, James said, "Hey, wait a minute. I should be getting the part." And he's the cause of all of us getting paid because he set it in motion. They were just using all his voice in so many rap songs, and they weren't using mine yet. And I'm glad that James caught it before they started with me. But I really appreciate it. Yeah.
Should we take another student question?
Yeah, there's someone else here. You had your hand up. No? I'm not a student. Well, I think we can...
Can we move on to the adults?
Go for it. Yeah.
Hi, I'm fascinated by the overt politics in some of the music, but I'm also lately thinking a lot about the way music broke down racial lines when it wasn't necessarily overtly political. For example, Elvin Bishop in white blues clubs in Chicago being welcomed in by an essentially all-black audience and being invited on stage and making music, Charlie Musselwhite being another one. Or some of the early Booker T and the MGs being an interracial band, talking about how they had to, depending on what town they were in or what side of town they were in, decide who was going to be able to go get lunch, because only one half the band could go to the restaurant and buy the lunch. The other half had to wait. So in what ways did, or Chris, in recording some of the old blues guys or some of the old field holler stuff, how were you welcomed into these what were essentially segregated areas, except that music broke some of those barriers down? So what is your experience with how music, even not overtly political music, broke down the racial barriers?
Well, the only thing I can say is that the record man was always welcome. Because, to make a record, really, in those days, was to get a meal ticket. If it got played, if it got publicized, that was one way of hoping to get out of your field work or whatever you were doing. And so I never had any problem there. And I remember the first time I met Clifton Chenier, when Lightning Hopkins, and I met him and he introduced me. He immediately knew that I must be a record man. I was just trying. I didn't have a pot to pee in those days, but I tried, And so you were immediately called the record man, who was the hope of getting a record out there that would sell, just like you figured, once it starts selling. I mean, your father did all that work for you.
He did.
He didn't directly have that. But I also realized that protest songs, I just want to mention one in the Mexican field, for example. I got to know, Flaco Jimenez fairly well. He's a wonderful accordion player in San Antonio. And I asked him, how come you don't really like to do corridos? Corridos are these narrative ballads that speak the truth about what was going on there. You do deal with interracial conflict, very often gringos versus Mexicans and so on. And he said, Chris, if you're going to sing one of those songs, I know you're going to please some of your audience, but you have just as many people, if not more, who won't like it. They don't want to fool with it. It's something that you ought to stay away from if you want to be a popular musician. And so I was going to play you actually one that was a pretty powerful protest song against the governor of Texas, who called out the hated Texas Rangers to beat up a strike in the Rio Grande Valley. They called them Rinchis. That's the word for the Texas Rangers, Los Rinchis de Texas is the name of the song, but I don't think I have time to do that. But and also you'd have to get somebody on your computer to get the English words up there.
That's a little beyond my capacity. Mavis, there's interesting discussion of your Muscle Shoals sessions in the biography that Greg Pott wrote about you and your family. I mean, does that speak to this question? About the way in which actually making records breaks down or affects racial
yes, that was, at that time, because all the Muscle Shoals guys were white. And, but we just, we knew, it didn't really, not really, because people just took it as really good music. Those guys were so good. And that's what Muscle Shoals was about, just music. You go to Muscle Shoals, that's all you can do is do your music, because that's all that is there is recording studios and some catfish, That's what I remember most about Muscle Shoals. We'd have to, but these guys, that was a different kind of session for us, because they would stop. We would record sometimes in Memphis over into the AM. But at 8 o'clock at night, if I'm in the little box singing, and say 8 o'clock, that's it. Okay, Mavis. I said, wait, let me finish this. No, we have to. They had a time frame. Well, I think it was about the wives. They wanted their husbands home at a certain time, They weren't be cooking and they don't come home for dinner. And we understood, but no, Muscle Shoals, it wasn't any kind of, with Booker T and MGs like you mentioned, that was really shocking to us when we hit Memphis and went to Stax and we saw 2 white guys and 2 black guys in the, and I never knew whether or not they even tried to go in a restaurant together, because we always order barbecue in the studio. We always had our dinners and lunches there. So, but it was Pops and us. We talked about, hey, y'all see these guys got 2 white guys with them. We didn't know that until we went to Memphis, and it was really pleasant to see. I tell you, it was really good to see, because Steve Cropper produced my first solo CD album, and I enjoyed working with him. He was the very first down south, a white person that I had worked with. And it was just, everybody is, I've always known everybody's the same, it's black and white. But we do know that there was a split between us. And I'm grateful that today it's better. My work is not finished. What I do is not finished. I still have a lot more work to do, because I see it. I see it in Chicago where I live. I can watch the news, and a black family can move into a neighborhood. They get in just fine. But the next morning, when they wake up, their garages, there's graffiti everywhere, their cars painted up. It's just, sometimes there's a cross in the yard, so that just lets me know it's still a lot of work to be done. And I'm still working on the building. Yeah. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. Kim, did you want to jump in on this one or no?
I was just gonna mention something about when people talk about segregation, and they talk about it like it's separation. And there's a difference. I mean, when I've played with mostly much older jazz musicians, and from the stories that they've told me, and a lot of those are housed in Bancroft. There's an oral history project for, the Fillmore, district. White people could come into the Fillmore and jam. It's the black musician that can't go over on the other side of Van Ness and do that. Or if you did have a gig, then you needed to come back on the other side of town and maybe have take a housing there, because you couldn't, be there. So I mean, this is the same in you go all the way back to into the 30s, and John Hammond and Goodman and Billy, and people are playing. There's always interracial records that are being made. I don't see that a lot of black people just don't want to accept. If you're a good white player, you're a good white player. Yeah. You can hang. Come on. It's going into the other areas that becomes more difficult.
Okay, we have some questions on this side of the room too. Yes, right down in front. There's a microphone coming down to you in 5 seconds. Right here, this lady.
In 2003, the day that the Iraq War was starting, I went down to San Francisco from Stanford with a bunch of Stanford students to demonstrate against it. And we were in the street, blocking traffic, and I said to these, they were all way younger than me, and I said, you guys know that song, We Shall Not Be Moved? We're standing in front of traffic. What? No, we don't know that. And anyway, it turned out, right, that like when you played 1, 2, 3, who are you fighting for? I just looked around and I saw not many people my age, but whoever was going 1, 2, 3, right? We all sing along, right? We could hardly contain ourselves. So anyway, my question is, was that incredible, rich music that was the heart of the movement, as you were saying, Waldo? Was that just a product of an era? Was it because it was a black movement and the Vietnam War protest movement? Is it gone? Where is music in social movements today? It's not gone, but where is it? Like, those kids didn't know those songs. They didn't know any songs, actually. I mean, for standing in the street and protesting. You know, they knew a lot of songs, right?
Yeah.
So what's the picture today?
Is it any, I don't know.
If you're ready.
Yeah, I find that the young people know the songs. You know, I get so many requests for these songs from, and some of them that I say, oh gosh, I gotta think back on that, but they go back, you know, and I was so surprised. Well, that's a long story. That's another story. But I think they know the songs. You know, when I tell a story about how us young people from the movement, we decided, as teenagers, you know, we decided one morning we were going to march without the elders, and we went march. That you mentioned that song, "We Shall Not Be Moved." We started walking, and somebody yelled out, "Let's get something to eat," and we stupidly went into a restaurant. All of us went into this restaurant. We sit down, and the lady saw us coming in, and she went in the back, and we sit there. And she finally came out, and when she came out, she told us, "We don't serve your kind. Y'all get out." And we just sit there. And she finally came, she went back, she came back, took a long time, she came back again. She said, "I told you to get out. I'm going to call the police." And so she called the police. And when we saw the police coming, we locked arms. And we started singing, we shall not be moved. And we got a while away that time. We were lucky. But we never went out again without the elders, because we would have been in trouble had to be going to jail. You know, they didn't know we were out there. But that song just, you know, got away from your question. But I think that the young people are aware of, they go on the internet with us, because that's what mostly I sing, protest songs, and that's what the staple singers are known for a lot. We were with Dr. King, and so they look up and follow what we've done. And then a lot of those old songs are on my Freedom CD with Rakuda. You know, so I don't find that, and when we sing them in shows, they're singing right along with us, you know, the old songs.
I think it's Stanford.
All right.
I mean, and it only takes, you know, it only takes a minute to teach somebody these songs. And I'm always teaching young people, you know, these songs. So can you say, "I'm on my way"? Can you say, "I'm on my way"?
I'm on my way.
To Freedom Land.
Freedom Land.
I'm on my way.
I'm on my way.
To Freedom Land.
To Freedom Land.
I'm on my way.
I'm on my way.
To Freedom Land.
To Freedom Land.
I'm on my way. Oh Lord, I'm on my way. And you know, we can go on. I mean, you know, it doesn't take but 2 seconds.
All right, that is.
But don't you think that at that time you knew a body of songs that were really happening and they were widespread? Today, it seems to me that almost every person has some other kind of music in their heads. I don't think they have this commonality that we had in those days of the songs that were at that time really widely circulated, you know? That's
Chris, as a record man, do you think it's the technology, the fact that today people get their music right into their ears from the internet rather than going down to your shop and buying it? No, but I'm serious.
Well, in those days, records were important, but I think more important were actually, like you say, the church. The churches, especially the black community, were enormously important, and you had a common body of songs there that you could work with. Don't you think so? And I don't care whether it was strict Baptist or whether it was holiness people, you know. You knew a certain body of songs, and they adapted them to the protest thing. But while today, I don't think there is such a thing. Maybe I'm wrong, but maybe there's some other people that have.
Okay, we have a gentleman back here, and then we have a question coming up down here. So,
it's a few short questions, and the first one is addressed mainly to Kim. I run a company that does a mixture of Celtic and jazz, and we've had the great pleasure of doing a lot of African American jazz radio. And I would like Kim just to briefly reflect on the state of African American jazz radio in the Bay Area, because our experience, yeah, exactly, yeah, our experience of it was this elderly blind gentleman, Doug Edwards, great guy, yeah, incredibly manfully trying to keep this show together, and he's now the equally great African Jamal Davis has that. So that's my first question. It's about that. The second question is about jazz in general, because jazz in general in the United States, our experience is that, frankly, this is going to sound awfully mercenary, but we can actually hire good jazz musicians here for a fraction of the price of anywhere. Our two piano players, through no fault of ours, both lost their houses. So we now have them doing Gaelic jazz. We're flying them over to Ireland to do Gaelic poetry. It's an extraordinary thing. So the second question is about jazz in general. The third is more directed to Chris. It's about the music industry. And I'm just wondering if he is aware of any of the various scams to do with mechanical rights, for example. Related to that is Ruth Brown took decades to get her royalties from Atlantic Records. And our experience is that there is a pretty organized scam going on there. So thanks very much. Those are my three questions.
okay, Kim, you want to start?
Well, there's definitely been a loss of a lot of really important people, important DJs. Of course, the death of K-Jazz, and but there's also some other, there's other stations, KPFA, and also we've got KPOO, which is a wonderful station, and we have KCSM. For me as a vocalist, there is a convention that that you're not allowed to play more than 25% vocal music on a jazz station, and I think that as you said, singing is just an integral part of black music in general. It's the whole history of black music, and also for protest music, it really means something a little bit different, when you're singing lyrics as opposed to maybe instrumental music that has a theme. So I think that there really is there is a big problem. As far as the fraction, I think New York gets that award because, you go to New York and you can see, big name people, really big name people, and, you're paying a really good ticket price. And, and I'm not going to name names, but, $40 for the sideman. And another very, very popular place, probably one of the more famous jazz clubs there, the sideman gets $75 a man. I mean, that's worse than the Bay Area, I think.
Chris, thoughts on the question about the big recording industries and...
I'm just a little ant in the picture of the record industry, a mini ant. I think it's, some, of course, made a lot of money on whatever it is, but you also got to consider a lot of these musicians take forever to make a damn record. And so they never get any royalties. And then they scream, what happened to our royalties? Well, if they spent $200,000, $300,000 making the damn record, you got to sell so many millions of records to make anything. And so I don't know. I can't really speak for the industry. I have very little to do with it. I'm kind of a little fish in this trying to swim in this water that has disappeared. I mean, basically the record industry is kind of dead, There are no more discs. I mean, some people like vinyl coming back, sure, but it's a mini fraction. There are no more real stores. Tower is gone, Virgin is gone. It used to be a huge business, and especially when you deal with minority music. I mean, I know especially that Mexican market on the border, they used to sell a lot of records in those days. But they were meal tickets to most people, you know? And if you got out there, then people would come to your dance. If you didn't have a record out, nobody had heard of you, they wouldn't come to your dances, you know? It's a kind of a... I don't want to talk any more about that, really.
Okay.
It's not
There's a question down here. Go ahead.
This is from Mavis Stable, and I think what's happening is at the time that you were making music, I know when I Take You There came out, there was a lot of underground going on. People were trying to connect, and we had to go to little hideouts and undertows in order to do our thing. So when that record come out, we were all connecting. We didn't have to know the lyrics because we didn't know the lyrics, but the movement and the sound and all the oohs and ahs that was going on was something that was like devious or undertow that was going on. We all connected, didn't have to know the words. So it was like, boy, she really got that horn in, and everyone just flew out on the dance floor. This is in the 70s, and I wasn't religious at all then, but that record connected everybody that ever heard it, and we went back every weekend to hear it. And my thing is, we didn't corroborate, but what was that unspoken language that we all connect to, and that music doesn't seem to lend itself to these days, which is the answer to probably what you need to know about why young people aren't really connecting. I don't know where they go to have parties or that underground thing that people try to get to connect with that psyche. Is that going on still?
Well, you know, I'll Take You There.
Oh, that was great.
It was a big record, and when the church people heard it, they wanted to put us out of church, you know, because it had a beat, and everybody jumped up to dance to it, and
the lyrics
was covered across the board. It was played on R&B. So all of a sudden they're saying Staples singing the devil's music, you know. And we had to do so many interviews. I would let them know the devil ain't got no music.
Oh, he's not at all.
He ain't got no music. So I said, you all have to listen to what we're saying. You have to listen to the lyrics. You know, we're telling you, I know a place. Ain't nobody crying. Ain't nobody worried. Ain't no smiling faces lying to the races. Where else could we be taking you but to heaven? You know, we're still singing God's praises. You know, and still, you know, they finally got on, started listening, and all of a sudden, we were invited back to church. The very first song, right in the pulpit, requested, I'll Take You There. And we hit it. You know, it was just, they had been used to hearing the Staples singers. We sang with just our father's guitar for years. Mm-hmm. You know, we didn't have a rhythm section. And that beat, bum, 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 and I danced too, you know. But
he didn't need nothing else. For sure, he was so good.
So it just grabbed you, you know. It just grabbed. It speaks to you. It speaks to you. That's right, and it makes you move. And the church folk thought that nothing but and see that spirit too. They say when the spirit hits you, you got to move. Well, that was the spirit hitting those kids that was jumping out there dancing, and they probably weren't listening to the lyrics either. They just heard that beat, and it made them move. You know, so hope that answers your question. Okie dokie.
Other questions? Way in the back, right by the microphone.
One of the great fights of this moment is against the privatization of the public sector and the usurpation of our democracy by the plutocracy. And I wanted to say quickly, there is a local battle over this at a critical juncture here in Berkeley, which is the sale of our beautiful downtown post office against the wishes of our community. And I'm mentioning it here because a sale was announced last weekend after 2 years of protest. And this weekend, we are taking our inspiration from you and organizing a musical mobilization to stop it called Jam the Sale, inviting musicians and everybody as a musician to just come to the steps of the post office and play nonstop until they withdraw it from sale. So my first question is... Anyone who wants more information about that, please see me. We'd love to see our illustrious guests there. But I also have a scholarly question about following up really on the two before about what is it about music technically that makes it so effective as a means of protest. And people have mentioned the rhythm and its capacity to, say, organize a community, and the culture and its capacity to enhance people's sense of belonging. But I also wonder, when you, apart from the lyrics that Ms. Staples was just talking about, when you hear that transformation of a voice from a speaking voice to a singing voice, it feels like it has this exaltation and power, and I just, that and what rhythms work, why does it work so well, I guess is kind of my question.
Well, I've been told that the best rhythm for getting people is the ones closest to your heartbeat. Yeah, and I'm always trying to, I have to count off the tunes for the band. I'm always trying to slow them down a little bit. I think jazz players, they play too fast sometimes. That's why they lose people. If you want to get scholarly, that's what I would say. Heartbeat, tempo.
And there are parts of the brain that respond. There's a whole neuropsychological aspect of this. There are there's some good, I've read a couple of the books on this. So there's also a brain response that's happening. So there's that too. Yeah. It's not as interesting as the heartbeat.
The heartbeat. But certain keys. Why is minor so deep?
And you mentioned James Brown. That was one of his geniuses on the one. Because
on the one.
On the one, the way the whole revolution in rhythm in the '60s in terms of black music that James Brown created, and
that's right.
On the one, as opposed to 1, 2, 3, 4. 1,
yeah.
1, 2, 3. 4. And he totally transformed sort of music. James was a genius.
Another question down here, and then we may have time for one more after that, if you're thinking up your best questions. Yeah.
Actually, I wanted to start with a statement and then just get some feedback. But I was part of the Civil Rights Movement, first Berkeley Campus Corps, then Bogalusa, Louisiana, and then, of course, the free speech movement, and then the anti-war movement. And my experience is that music isn't an and or with. It was the cause of a lot of our action. In the face of tremendous fear, in the face of police approaching, attacking, the singing allowed us to move forward. It was the cause of the action. It wasn't an auxiliary. And to me, that's why it was so, so powerful. I can remember being on so many picket lines, demonstrations, marches, arrests, where my fear would have overtaken me unless it was the music.
That substantiates my scholarly thesis.
Yes, a couple of people lined up here. Why don't you each ask your questions, and then we'll get the panel to respond as we're kind of wrapping things up. Go ahead.
Yes, I would like to mention that when I wrote my paper on music as protest strategy at Tiananmen, I had been part of that movement back in 1989. I found that many of these elements were very important, the kind of music and the lyrics and everything. But beyond that, or even before that, the simple act of occupying a sound space was critical. It wasn't so much whether the music was a child's song or a TV theme song or something which came out of a political education class. It was always the act of opening your mouth and occupying through your own voice and claiming the right to that space and well, it's very complex, as you know. It's very detailed, but I found that took precedence over anything else. And of course, the more participatory it was, the more improvisatory it was, the more personal it was, and the more powerful it was. And that said, on the walls of the buildings at the universities, there were copies of the lyrics and the music of many of the songs that the students sang, so that people coming into the square would have that foundation on which to build. And one thing which I expected to hear more of today, which I haven't quite heard yet, but it's the ephemeral nature of protest music. And that is that the people who are protesting do not have in mind making money from their music. They are not thinking about who's going to use their ideas. We had two well-known singers at Tiananmen Square, Ho Zhijian and Sui Jian. But other than that, it was not about how is this going to affect my stature. It was simply, this is something which we are sharing here today in order to make a better world for the future. And when the goddess of democracy went up, they made a point to include all kinds of music in front of that statue, so that every voice could be heard, whether or not it was understood or not appreciated. I could go on, but I don't think I should do that. But they did not know We Shall Overcome. They did not know the songs that we took for granted from the civil rights movement at all. But they made an effort to educate each other about the songs they wanted to share at that space.
Okay, thank you. And there's a question 2 rows in front there. You could just hand the microphone right down.
Hi. I grew up in Chicago, and the first time that I heard Miss Staples perform, I was like 5 years old, and you were doing a concert of Mahalia Jackson's songs, and it changed my life. And I had the privilege of growing up in a diverse community in the city where those songs, the protest songs, were ingrained in our education, our music education. And since coming here to college, the only source of revisiting those songs have been in Professor Martin's class. And and I'm so appreciative for that, but it's so different to hear those songs in an academic setting rather than singing them with your friends on the playground. And my question is, how does a generation that did not experience the historical context of the creation of those songs, how does that spirit sustain itself?
I think through the songs. You know, like you said, you heard me singing a concert of Sister Mahalia Jackson songs. And I was doing that to keep her name alive and to let it be known what she did, what she was about. And the way you sounded, you got it. You know? I think that's the only way we can do it, is to sing these songs and for people and young people to hear them and take them into their hearts. And, you know, if you like it, listen to it, see what the lyrics are saying so you know what they're about. And take it and go with it. Make it yours. It's yours. It belongs to you now. You know.
You make your own music.
Right.
Create your own. Sustain it. You know, it's a tradition that lives.
Right.
And we have to keep the tradition alive. So.
That's right.
I think that's about as fine a note as we could end on. We've come to the end of our time here. Let's thank our panel. Yes, thank you. And before you go, two things. One, there is a reception right outside with food and drink that you're all welcome to. And second, Mavis Staples is working on the building tonight at Zellerbach Hall at 8 o'clock. So be there, everybody. All right.
All right.
That's right.
See you.